Kevin Mark Levrone entered the world on July 16, 1964, in Baltimore, Maryland, a city that was then undergoing major social and economic transformations, and his arrival into this environment would shape the man he would later become. Baltimore in the 1960s was a patchwork of working-class neighborhoods, industrial centers, and a vibrant African-American culture, but it was also a place marked by struggles with segregation, poverty, and crime. Kevin's parents came from two distinct cultural backgrounds. His father was Italian-American, a man whose family roots stretched back to Sicily, while his mother was African-American, part of a community that had endured decades of social inequality but also carried with it a rich heritage of resilience, music, and faith. From this union, Kevin inherited a unique blend of cultural traditions, values, and appearances which made him stand out in the diverse but often divided neighborhoods of Baltimore. He was the youngest of 6 siblings, and being the last-born gave him a certain special place in the household. The family's modest home was alive with the daily chaos of children, chores, and challenges, but Kevin grew up learning responsibility, determination, and survival from an early age. As a young boy, Kevin's life was shaped by both joy and hardship. His father passed away when Kevin was only 10 years old, leaving the family with a painful void. The absence of a father figure during such crucial developmental years had a profound effect on him, and it thrust additional responsibility onto his older siblings and his mother, who now carried the burden of raising the children on her own. Kevin learned very quickly what it meant to live without luxury and without the steady hand of a father to guide him. His mother, though, was a pillar of strength. She taught him values that would stay with him forever: perseverance, discipline, and the ability to face hardship with dignity. She encouraged education as a path to security and independence, and Kevin attended his local elementary and middle schools in Baltimore. The schools he went to were not elite institutions but typical working-class public schools, with crowded classrooms, limited resources, and teachers who were often stretched thin. Still, Kevin's curiosity and determination to make something of himself meant he paid attention to lessons and absorbed the idea that knowledge and effort could open doors. Like many boys in Baltimore at the time, sports and physical activity were outlets for energy and emotion, and Kevin found himself naturally drawn toward athletics and physical exertion. By the time he reached adolescence, Kevin was navigating the difficult realities of inner-city life. Baltimore in the 1970s was a city that offered temptations and dangers, from crime to drugs, but Kevin had the advantage of a strong internal compass shaped by the hardships of losing his father and, later, the devastating loss of his mother, who passed away after a battle with cancer. These tragedies could have derailed him entirely, but instead they forged in him an extraordinary mental toughness. He turned to physical training not just as recreation but as therapy, a way to channel grief and frustration into something positive. His cousin, who had returned from military service with a strong, muscular physique, provided one of the first sparks of inspiration for Kevin. Seeing how disciplined training could transform the body left a deep impression on the teenager. Around this same time, Kevin's interest in weight training grew, and he began to experiment with exercises, often improvising with what little equipment he had access to. Baltimore gyms were not abundant in every neighborhood, so Kevin sometimes trained in basements or community centers, slowly developing a passion for pushing his body beyond its limits. In terms of formal education, while detailed records of Kevin's specific primary and secondary schools are not widely published, it is understood that he completed his high school years in Baltimore before stepping into the working world. There is no reliable evidence that Kevin pursued a traditional college education. Most biographies agree that he went straight into work and bodybuilding, using his early jobs as both income and a way to discipline himself for the future. For a time, he worked in construction, a job that required both physical strength and endurance, and which only reinforced his developing appreciation for what the human body could achieve. The labor was grueling, but Kevin approached it with the same mentality that he would later apply to the gym: show up every day, put in the work, and do not complain. This mindset would serve him well as he transitioned toward bodybuilding competitions in his 20s. His construction work also instilled in him a sense of independence. Kevin had to take responsibility for his own survival and success, and that independence became part of his identity. Even without a college degree, his education came from the school of life, shaped by loss, labor, and the lessons of resilience. As Kevin's physique developed and his interest in bodybuilding intensified, he began entering amateur competitions. By 1991, he had earned his IFBB Pro card after winning the NPC Nationals, a monumental accomplishment that launched him into the professional bodybuilding scene. Yet, beneath this rising fame and growing recognition, Kevin was still the boy from Baltimore who had endured heartbreak, who had been inspired by his cousin, and who had learned to overcome grief through discipline. His story, therefore, is not just about muscles and trophies but about how early life adversity laid the foundation for everything that followed. Beyond his professional success, people have long been curious about Kevin's personal life, his relationships, his married life, and his children. In contrast to his public career, Kevin has been relatively private about his family. Unlike many athletes who allow the media to scrutinize every detail of their marriages and personal affairs, Kevin has generally chosen to keep his private life away from the spotlight. What is known, however, is that Kevin is a father, and that role has been one of the most important aspects of his identity. He has a son named Gabe Levrone, whom he has mentioned with pride in interviews. Gabe represents continuity, a reason for Kevin to push himself not only in competitions but also in business and life. Raising a son has given Kevin new perspectives on responsibility, legacy, and what it means to inspire the next generation. While there are scattered reports suggesting he may have more than one child, Gabe is the only child consistently referenced by credible sources. When it comes to Kevin's marriage, the details are much murkier. Some sources have mistakenly linked his name to Sydney McLaughlin Levrone, the Olympic track and field athlete, because she shares the surname through her own marriage to Andre Levrone Jr., who is unrelated to Kevin. This has created some confusion online, but to clarify, Kevin Levrone, the bodybuilder, is not married to Sydney McLaughlin Levrone. There are occasional mentions of a spouse named Sydney in less reliable outlets, but these claims remain unverified and are likely errors arising from the confusion between Kevin and Andre Levrone Jr. As such, Kevin's wife's name, if he is indeed married, is not consistently or reliably documented in the public record. What is certain is that Kevin has deliberately chosen to shield his family from the intense media attention that often surrounds professional athletes. This decision reflects his protective instincts and his understanding that fame can sometimes be more burden than blessing. Despite the lack of clarity about his spouse, the evidence that Kevin is a devoted father is strong. His son Gabe has been a source of joy, motivation, and pride. Kevin has spoken about how fatherhood changed his priorities, making him think less about short-term goals like competition wins and more about long-term goals such as health, stability, and leaving a meaningful legacy. For a man who built his career on pushing physical limits, fatherhood introduced a softer dimension to his personality, balancing intensity with care. Gabe's presence in his life has also been a reminder of Kevin's own childhood experiences, the pain of losing his father and mother, and the desire to provide his son with the stability and support he himself lost so early. In this way, Kevin's personal life comes full circle. The boy who grew up without parents became a man determined to be present and supportive for his own child. Kevin Levrone's journey from a boy in Baltimore to a bodybuilding legend is remarkable not just for the trophies and accolades but for the human story at its center. His early life was defined by cultural diversity, tragedy, and resilience. His education may not have followed the traditional academic route, but he learned discipline, responsibility, and determination in the classrooms of hardship and labor. His personal life, though kept private, reflects the same values. He is a man who treasures his role as a father and guards the privacy of his family with great care. The world knows Kevin Levrone the competitor, the showman, and the motivational figure, but behind the stage lights is a man who endured deep loss, who learned to rise from pain, and who dedicated himself to building both his body and his life from the ground up. His story continues to inspire not only gym enthusiasts but anyone who understands that greatness is born not in comfort but in struggle, and that legacy is measured not only in personal achievements but in the love and values we pass to our children. The combination of Arnold's charisma, discipline, and relentless pursuit of greatness gave Kevin a figure to emulate. He did not merely want to lift weights, he wanted to chase excellence the way Arnold had done. In Arnold, Kevin saw a reflection of what he could become if he pushed himself far enough. But Arnold was not the only influence. By the time Kevin was stepping into the competitive scene in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Lee Haney had established himself as the reigning king of bodybuilding, with 8 Mr. Olympia titles to his name. Haney's balance of size, symmetry, and aesthetics represented a modern ideal, and his reputation for being both a champion and a grounded, humble man resonated with Kevin. Haney demonstrated that one could be dominant without arrogance, powerful without being unapproachable. This balance inspired Kevin to approach his own bodybuilding career with humility and a focus on self-improvement rather than ego. Later, when Dorian Yates rose to dominance in the 1990s with his mass monster physique and relentless intensity, Kevin was once again motivated to push harder. Competing against Dorian gave Kevin a rival, someone who forced him to dig deeper, to train harder, and to test his limits. Dorian's blood and guts training philosophy challenged Kevin to raise his own standards, and though the two had very different training styles, Kevin acknowledged that Yates's success motivated him to refine his own approach. Yet, Kevin's motivation from the gym was not limited to the influence of bodybuilding icons. His internal motivation, rooted in his personal tragedies, was perhaps even stronger. After losing both parents at a young age, Kevin turned the gym into a place where he could rewrite his story. In the silence of training, in the clank of iron, he found therapy. Each repetition became an act of defiance against despair, each set a declaration that he would not be broken by life's cruelties. For Kevin, the gym was not optional, it was essential. Without it, he might have fallen into hopelessness, but with it, he discovered strength, focus, and purpose. Many times, he described training as a spiritual act, a way of connecting to something greater than himself. The pain of lifting heavy weights mirrored the pain of life, but the growth that came from it mirrored the growth that comes from overcoming adversity. This philosophy transformed the gym into a sacred space, one that motivated him to return day after day, year after year. Kevin Levrone's relationship with the gym was never merely about lifting weights or sculpting a body, it was a deeply personal connection to discipline, therapy, creativity, and legacy. To truly understand how the gym motivated him throughout his life, one must first see how loss, environment, and inspiration converged to shape his path. Born in 1964 in Baltimore, Maryland, Kevin grew up in a working-class neighborhood where resilience was necessary for survival. The passing of both his parents while he was still young left him with an emotional emptiness that could have easily derailed his future. For Kevin, the gym became more than just a room filled with iron and machines, it became a sanctuary, a place where grief could be transformed into power, where self-doubt could be silenced by sweat, and where purpose could be rebuilt set by set, rep by rep. This connection between struggle and strength formed the bedrock of his motivation. Every time he walked into the gym, he was reminded of what he had lost, but he also felt the empowering realization that he had the ability to create, to build, and to control at least one part of his life. The motivation Kevin found in the gym came initially from observing transformation. As a boy, he watched his cousin return from military service with a physique that looked powerful, disciplined, and larger than life. The muscles were not just about appearance, they symbolized order, courage, and resilience, values Kevin deeply needed at that stage of his life. His cousin's transformation was the spark that made him believe that lifting weights was not simply about vanity but about becoming a stronger version of oneself in every sense. The young Kevin absorbed this message and began imitating what he saw, experimenting with weight training in basements, garages, and community centers, long before he had access to proper gym facilities. His cousin was his first role model, the first person who taught him that the body could be shaped into a shield against hardship, and this lesson would stay with him for decades. As he grew older and more serious about training, Kevin began looking outward to the giants of bodybuilding history for inspiration. In the 1970s and 1980s, the golden era of bodybuilding was in full bloom. Icons like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu, and Frank Zane had already become global legends, and their images filled the pages of fitness magazines worldwide. Kevin, flipping through those glossy spreads, saw not just physiques but lifestyles, dedicated, ambitious men who had used the gym as a launchpad to success, fame, and self-mastery. Of all these legends, Arnold stood out as the most influential. For Kevin, Arnold was proof that bodybuilding could be more than a hobby, it could be a career, a platform, and even a way to inspire millions. Kevin's motivation was also fueled by the competitive nature of bodybuilding itself. The stage demanded perfection, and the gym was the laboratory where perfection was built. Every time Kevin trained, he he was reminded that his rivals were also training, that the battle for the best physique was won long before the contest, in the hours spent sweating and grinding in the gym. This competitive edge kept him sharp. He was motivated not only by personal loss or the desire for growth but also by the knowledge that others were chasing the same dream. The thought of standing on stage unprepared was unacceptable, and this fear drove him to embrace the hardest training sessions, the most disciplined diets, and the sacrifices required of a champion. The people who motivated Kevin extended beyond bodybuilding legends and competitors. His fans, too, became a source of energy. As his career progressed, Kevin realized that countless people were watching him, looking up to him, and drawing strength from his example. Each letter from a fan, each handshake after a competition, each story of someone who said Kevin inspired them to start training, all of these interactions added fuel to his fire. The gym, in this sense, was not just about personal transformation but about becoming a symbol of hope for others. Kevin understood that if he gave up, he would not only disappoint himself but also those who believed in him. The responsibility of being a role model became another layer of motivation, one that carried him through injuries, setbacks, and moments of doubt. As time went on, Kevin also drew motivation from the idea of legacy. The gym was the place where he built not only his body but his reputation. Every workout was an investment in a future where his name would be remembered alongside the greatest bodybuilders of all time. The desire to be immortalized in the history of bodybuilding, to be mentioned in the same breath as Arnold, Haney, or Yates, pushed him through the pain of countless training sessions. Legacy became a motivator, and the gym was the canvas upon which he painted that legacy, stroke by stroke, muscle by muscle. In later years, when Kevin returned to the stage after years of retirement, the gym once again proved its power as a motivator. At an age when most athletes had long since faded away, Kevin reignited his passion and prepared for a comeback. This decision was motivated not just by personal ambition but by the desire to prove that age is not a barrier, that discipline and willpower can defy expectations. His comeback showed the world that the gym was not just a young man's game, it was a lifelong companion, a source of vitality that never truly left him. In this way, the gym continued to motivate him even decades after his first set of curls in a Baltimore basement. The story of Kevin Levrone's motivation is, therefore, a story of convergence. The gym motivated him because it gave him control when life had taken so much away. His cousin motivated him by showing what was possible through discipline. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lee Haney, and Dorian Yates motivated him by setting standards of excellence that he wanted to meet or surpass. His fans motivated him by reminding him that his journey was bigger than himself. And his own losses motivated him by teaching him that the only way to honor his parents' memory was to push forward, to build, to rise. For Kevin, the gym was never just about muscles. It was about life, death, resilience, rivalry, legacy, and love. It was the one place where pain became progress, where tragedy became triumph, and where a boy who lost his parents could become a man who inspired the world. Every rep he performed carried the weight of his past, the inspiration of his role models, and the hope of those who followed him. In that sense, the gym was both the motivator and the reward, the journey and the destination, the struggle and the triumph, all in one. Kevin Mark Levrone's career in professional bodybuilding cannot be discussed without an exhaustive exploration of his history on the Mr. Olympia stage. For decades, the Olympia has stood as the ultimate proving ground for the best physiques in the world, and Kevin's story within that contest is one of both glory and heartbreak. His journey to Olympia was not simply about competition, it was about testing the boundaries of human perseverance, coming face to face with the legends of the sport, and creating a legacy that would endure even without ever hoisting the Sandow trophy above his head. To understand his Olympia career is to understand the trials, the triumphs, the near victories, the bitter defeats, and the unrelenting motivation that defined him as one of the greatest bodybuilders never to win the sport's most coveted title. Kevin's introduction to the Olympia stage began in the early 1990s, a period considered one of the most competitive eras in bodybuilding history. After turning professional in 1991 by winning the NPC Nationals, a victory that announced him as a new force on the horizon, he set his sights on the Mr. Olympia, the contest that had been defined by icons like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sergio Oliva, Lee Haney, and was then being redefined by a new generation led by Dorian Yates. In 1992, Kevin made his Olympia debut, and for a rookie stepping onto the most intimidating stage in the sport, he did not merely participate, he shocked the bodybuilding world. In his first Olympia appearance, Levrone placed an astonishing second, falling only to the reigning champion Dorian Yates. This runner-up placing instantly validated Kevin as one of the top competitors in the world. Most bodybuilders take years to climb the ranks before reaching the top tier, but Kevin skipped the line through sheer genetic gifts, hard work, and an undeniable stage presence. That night, many fans began to believe that Kevin Levrone could one day be Mr. Olympia. The 1992 Olympia was a launching pad, but it also marked the beginning of a long and painful saga. Over and over again, Kevin would stand near the very top, brushing against victory, but never quite seizing it. Dorian Yates was a juggernaut, a man whose blood and guts training philosophy produced a physique of such mass and density that he ushered in the mass monster era. Kevin, while genetically gifted and aesthetically pleasing, had a different kind of physique, sleek, symmetrical, powerful, and capable of peaking with incredible conditioning. Fans debated endlessly whether Kevin's shape, lines, and flow were superior to Dorian's sheer size and granite hardness. Judges, however, consistently leaned toward Yates's overwhelming presence. In 1993, Kevin returned to Olympia, but this time he did not manage to repeat his runner-up finish. He placed fifth, a disappointing slip backward, though the setback was not without reason. Earlier that year, Kevin had suffered a devastating injury, tearing his major pectoral muscle during a bench press session. Many thought his career might end before it had even truly begun. Yet Kevin's resilience was legendary. He returned to the stage still carrying the scars of surgery, still rebuilding his chest, and while he could not challenge for the title that year, his mere presence spoke volumes about his determination. By 1994, Kevin had reasserted himself as a contender, taking third place behind Dorian Yates and Shawn Ray. This contest highlighted the era's incredible depth of talent. Yates with his size and density, Ray with his symmetry and detail, and Levrone with his mass, aesthetics, and charisma. That year marked the first of many times Kevin would hover at the edge of greatness, denied not by failure but by the sheer strength of the competition around him. In 1995, he slipped slightly to fifth again, but in 1996 he rebounded with another career-defining moment. At the 1996 Olympia, Kevin once again placed second, proving his ability to challenge the reigning champion. This time, however, the frustration deepened. He was so close, but Yates still stood unmovable at the top. Fans again debated. Some argued that Levrone's aesthetics and stage charisma should have toppled Yates's blunt force approach, while others maintained that Yates's back, conditioning, and mass were simply too dominant. The pattern continued through the late 1990s. In 1997, Kevin placed fourth, while Dorian Yates claimed his sixth and final Sandow before retiring from competition. Many thought Yates's retirement might finally open the door for Kevin. But bodybuilding is never that simple. A new wave of competitors, led by Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, Nasser El-Sonbati, and others, rose to challenge for the crown. In 1998, the Olympia stage was set for a changing of the guard. Shawn Ray, Flex Wheeler, and Kevin Levrone were all viewed as possible heirs to Yates's throne. Yet, in one of the most shocking results in bodybuilding history, it was Ronnie Coleman, a competitor who had previously been a mid-level pro, that stunned the world by winning the Mr. Olympia. Kevin, despite bringing one of his best packages, placed fourth. That defeat was crushing not because he had done poorly, but because the Sandow had slipped away into the hands of someone few had predicted, leaving Kevin once again as the nearly man of bodybuilding. From 1998 onward, the story of Kevin Levrone's Olympia career became tied to Ronnie Coleman's reign of dominance. Coleman was unlike anything the sport had ever seen: unbelievable size, extreme conditioning, and freakish proportions that rewrote the definition of a bodybuilding champion. Kevin, for all his strengths, found himself unable to topple Coleman, though he came close. In 2000, Kevin placed second to Ronnie, once again standing on the edge of glory but left in the shadow of an unstoppable champion. For many fans, this runner-up finish cemented the narrative that Kevin was the greatest bodybuilder never to win Olympia. He had all the tools: shoulders as wide as mountains, delts that looked carved from stone, symmetry, conditioning, and the ability to peak at the right time. But fate had placed him in the wrong era, an era dominated by once-in-a-lifetime champions. Throughout the early 2000s, Kevin remained a fixture of the Olympia stage, always in the mix, always within striking distance, but never able to secure the victory. He placed third in 2001, once again behind Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler, both of whom were redefining the size game. By 2002, Kevin had started to scale back his competitive focus, though he still finished in the top 6. In 2003, he made another run, placing 6th, but it was clear that Ronnie and Jay were battling on another level. For Kevin, these years were bittersweet. He was admired, respected, and even loved by fans and fellow competitors, but he could never quite grasp the ultimate title. Yet, to focus only on Kevin's Olympia defeats would be to ignore his many victories outside of that single contest. While the Sandow eluded him, Kevin amassed over 20 professional wins in the IFBB, including 2 Arnold Classic titles in 1994 and 1996. He dominated Grand Prix competitions across Europe, proving again and again that he was not only a contender but often the best man on stage. These victories added weight to the argument that he deserved at least one Olympia title, but the stars never aligned for him on that particular night. Kevin's resilience was further demonstrated by his decision to attempt to come back more than a decade after his supposed retirement. In 2016, at the age of 51, Kevin shocked the bodybuilding world by announcing he would return to the Mr. Olympia stage. Many doubted him, believing it was impossible to prepare a competitive physique after so many years away from the sport. Yet Kevin embraced the challenge, seeing it not as an opportunity to win but as a statement of willpower and passion. When he stepped on stage in Las Vegas, the crowd erupted in admiration. Though he placed last, his presence alone was a victory, a reminder that the gym had never stopped motivating him and that the Olympia stage still represented the pinnacle of achievement in bodybuilding. Looking back, Kevin Levrone's Olympia career can be described as a saga of near misses, resilience, and undying pursuit. He competed against 2 of the greatest champions in history, Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman, men whose reigns defined bodybuilding and left little room for anyone else. Kevin's defeats were not failures but testimonies to the extraordinary level of competition he faced. Time and again, he was the man closest to the crown, the one who pushed champions to bring their best. He became, in many ways, the people's champion, the bodybuilder who inspired with his perseverance even when victory seemed forever just out of reach. His legacy is not diminished by the absence of a Sandow trophy. On the contrary, it is elevated by the respect he earned in defeat, the victories he claimed elsewhere, and the lessons he imparted about determination, humility, and passion. Kevin Levrone's Olympia career was not a story of loss, but of how a man can achieve greatness even without the title, and how being remembered as one of the best is sometimes more powerful than being remembered as the best for a single year.